Okay, here we go. Day 46. Yep, we are on the air. We are live. Let's see. I don't know how long this is going to go. It's going to be a hot day here. We have some great guests coming up, but we do have a lot of updates. We do have a lot of updates right now. I want to just check our audio. Let me just double check. I think our audio. Good morning, everybody. Yes. And there's Bobby. And there's okay, there we go. And okay. Good morning. Yes. Good morning, one and all. We have some great guests, as I said, coming up. We're going to speak with Jennifer Coffendaffer, retired FBI. I think audio is clear. All right. I'm being told that on YouTube it's good. I believe on X it's good. I believe it's Facebook. Again, depends on where you are. It's still, I think it's still morning everywhere, actually. Um, it is, so just so everyone understands, we are 3 hours. We're Pacific Coast time. When I got here, we were 2 hours behind. Apparently, they don't believe in daylight savings for whatever reason. Not to judge, but okay, 12:09 in the East Coast. I'll go through the exact times. I just like to double check, and we're going to speak with the great Jennifer Coffendaffer coming up in just a moment. But I'm checking. I think our audio on X is solid. East Coast. And it is very solid. And we're also solid on Facebook. We have some great guests today. And I want to go through. Jen's going to join us 12:09. Yes. In like I said, East Coast time. Let me just check the clocks. I'm pretty sure I have a good idea of we're world clocks. Let's see. Yeah, Chicago is 11:10. Boston is 12:10. And so we're now 2 hours behind Chicago. So we're Pacific Coast time here in Tucson. It is day 46. We remain outside of the home. Yes. Well, when I say that though, when you say it's basic subtraction, but when I first arrived here, we were only 2 hours behind the East Coast, and now because of daylight savings, it's 3 hours behind the East Coast. Remember, if you're watching on Facebook, you can always send stars. If you're watching on YouTube and have a question, you can do what they call the super chats. And we will talk to our guests coming up. There's a lot of updates, information. I did post an update on both YouTube and Facebook regarding, and I think it's interesting. Now, for those of you who were watching yesterday or following yesterday, I did post that I know that Brian Enton had posted that a neighbor was talking about some men that were living nearby that seemingly like as soon as this happened that they moved out. So one moment. Let's see. Okay, let me send her that to there. Good morning. Okay. Hold on one moment. Okay. We should be good to go. All right. Um, we are going to be talking to Jen coming up. She is a retired FBI. She's the one that has some really good insight about the billboards, about the potential DNA that they did find and what might be the background on that. And they may have more information about that. Maybe not an exact person, but that they may have been able to glean some valuable information from that. I do want to show you. So, yesterday when I was here, I didn't show it, but some neighbors, the Neighborhood Association has come out and they've really cleaned up the flowers that are in front of Nancy's home. Somehow it spread to another chat that it was the FBI, no, it was neighbors. So the only ones that remain are artificial flowers, which just hold up better. So it is smaller, but it was becoming a problem with the rodents. But let me just stay on track. Yesterday, I mentioned, and Brian Enton, by the way, he also had mentioned that there was a neighbor that thought that they had some men that were living nearby and suddenly left soon after that. Okay, so that is one thing. But what I reported yesterday, and then Brian Enton of News Nation, who I respect and had a chance to deal with a little bit, what I reported, excuse me, I want to back up. What I reported yesterday was okay, the woman reported that, but today's Wednesday. The FBI then went and saw her and wanted to get more information about it. So, why that is significant, by the way, is listen, it's not lost on me. A lot of people have been reporting different tips to the FBI for different reasons. The FBI doesn't follow up on everything. And I know that some of you feel, well, they should be following up on everything. Well, but not if they feel that it has like no bearing on the case. Remember, no one knows more about this case than well, law enforcement, certainly the Sheriff Nanos, and also the FBI knows a lot. I would like to think, and a lot of people would like to think that the FBI knows everything the sheriff knows, but I'm not convinced of that. I'm still not convinced they're on the same page. The sheriff is definitely under fire. The sheriff, number one, yesterday, and I'm not going to get too much into that because I kind of regard this as that's kind of like political type of stuff of whether or not there is a recall against him, what bearing that could have on the investigation. That's the only part of that equation that I'm actually interested in, if that has some bearing on the equation. But for those, this is, as we've said, it is day 46, and that still remains, the figure right there in that doorway that you're looking at. And the new news today, I was speaking with a woman just a short time ago. So I get here, I like to do a morning walk around, kind of make the rounds. Um, there are construction crews in this area, and they've been here for a while. But what's different now is that, from what I understand, and we'll talk about this with Jen, but the FBI, the woman that I spoke to this morning, she said her friend is having her home. It's they own the home, but it's like a complete remodel. I think they call it from like ceiling to studs or some variation of that. They're just having like the whole thing redone. And so and this has been going on. This has been like a 6-month remodel. So whoever is running the construction on project on the home, they they don't just want names. They want to know everyone that has come in contact. And I'll say good morning to everybody who in some way has been working on the home. And I think it's interesting. Again, I'm going off a woman who I know and talk to in this area, and it's her friend. Good morning, everybody, who's having their home remodeled. There's Nancy's home behind me. And what's interesting is construction sometimes can be a little loose, such as, okay, there's this guy, Jose, and he comes out, when we need him. And if we really want to be honest, I don't know his last name, and we pay him in cash. And I have a translator that deals with him. Again, I'm just trying to be realistic. Not everybody that works construction is on the books, so to speak. A lot of people say, I'll do it, but I want to be off the books. Now, there's something else that a neighbor pointed out to me is there was a home constructed around here just in the last year. Again, construction project, and it's not a huge deal. And I don't want everyone to jump to conclusions, but this person told me that they were aware that there were several men on the job site who were actually on work release, and that can be very common within that industry. That you get people that are on work release. There are people they work during the day and they go back to the prison at night. You also get parolees who need a job and they take a job on a construction. But from what I've been told, and again, everybody, if you're watching on Facebook, you can share that you are watching. You can send stars if you say, boy, I love this. Look at this. Day 46. Right now, only one here. I think this afternoon more should be here, but only one here on the ground in front of the house. If you're watching on YouTube, you can send what they call the super chats and just something that says, hey, listen, I like this coverage. It's not easy. It's not easy. This is all self-funded. I don't have a boss that say we're going to send you out there, all expenses, nothing like that. Any hotel, rental car, equipment, meal, everything is Team DePietro. So anything like that. And again, it depends. Not everyone does. Some people say, I'm tired of the story. Well, I'm not tired of the story. I think we still have a long way to go. But I want to just finish the point from what I've been led to believe is no, they want everything. They are convinced that whoever abducted Nancy Guthrie from this home, and we don't know who that was still in that mask, but they are convinced whoever did that, that they, something brought them to this area. Something drew them to this house. Somehow, someone, this is again, they haven't come out and said this, but it certainly seems to be that they believe, and I think people get a wrong idea of targeted. Some people think that that means, oh, they were going after Savannah. I don't know. Let's back up for a moment. Before, at the end of January, this house, there's no dog, there was no alarm system. And when someone is targeting something, it could just be that they know of an 84-year-old woman that lives alone with no dog, no alarm system. I'm just showing you some of the, I don't see anyone in the driveway, but the flowers, the flowers still look beautiful. The flowers are still here. If you come out to put flowers, the cards are in the mailbox. Just make sure you bring artificial flowers because it was drawing those, whatever those things are. Um, they're like, I don't know what they are, but they eat the flowers. So look at this is a beautiful job that the neighborhood association has done, and then they're encouraging people to take some of these signs that Pinky left and so forth. But anyhow, but targeted means they may have no idea who Savannah Guthrie is. They have no idea actually who Nancy Guthrie is. But what they know is in this house, for some reason, they believed that there's a woman in here, and and that's what I've been led to believe is targeted. And we can ask Jen Coffindaffer, who's going to join us coming up. We have some other guests that are going to join us. It should be very strong. I think we're going to go long this morning, and the heat that's going to come in this afternoon might impact the broadcast. I think I'm going to shift into more hours in the morning. We may be starting earlier each day this week. We have a heat advisory in the area here in Tucson, Catalina foothills. Which again, I want people to understand. This is a very desirable area. It's a beautiful area. Everyone that I can only share my experience. Everyone. Oh, good. Hold on. Let me mention. Wow, look at that. Let me give a shout out to, thank you, Lane Branton. We appreciate your continued coverage. Have a great lunch. Thank you. I appreciate that. And there he is, my friend. Thank you, Cubic Z. My friend. Oh, wait a minute. We got another one also. Thank you, too. And this helps Debbie that I can. Oh, I missed the other one. There's another one. Thank you, Alicia. Super sticker. I love this. You guys do love the live coverage. I'll admit, it's not easy. And for those of you that do know me, I'm very tight with my family. I miss my family. I miss my children, who I interact with, talk with, um, and see a lot. It's not easy. It's not. I thought I was going to be when my son dropped me off at the airport. I said, "All right, I should be back in a week." I thought it was going to be like a manhunt. They have the ransom. This whole thing's going to come down, and now all of a sudden here we are. And now I'm not even counting days of the week. It's just day. Like what day is it? It's day 46. Make sure you follow the page. Make sure you follow the YouTube channel. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Valerie. Very, very sweet. That's the only time I was speaking with my son about March Madness, and we separately. If I was around with him, I would have watched the St. John's UConn game. Rick Pitino coached me many, many years in a youth All Star basketball game, when he was still just the coach at Boston University. So I've always been a Rick Pitino fan, and the guy's just a winner. And then, but anyhow, but we remain on the ground, and I think it's important. And I'll share with you. Yesterday was a good example. That, thank you, Karen. Thank you. Yes, and I think I'll play this. I had played this for the TikTok crowd. I did share this if you're a subscriber on Facebook. I'm not going to post it on Facebook. I did post this video on X. Oh, wait a minute. Ah, I just realized if I take out I'll play it a little bit later. Those of you, it's with it's from the Wolf of Wall Street. I want to. Oh, good. I think I want to tell Debbie I can see them now. So Debbie is terrific. Our mod on yes, I can see them. I don't want to throw off the sound. So that's why if I took out my earbuds, I'll play it a little bit later. I'll play it a little bit later when I know that it's not going to throw off the sound. But anyhow, it has to do with the people that were asking me, "Are you leaving? When are you leaving? How come you're not going home?" And and I try to explain, I haven't had a curfew since high school, and even that was kind of questionable. I was the youngest of seven, so I didn't really have like a solid curfew. But this business of when are you going home and so forth, this will be funnier when you watch it. But Sal came up with this, and this is the theme of the Wolf of Wall Street of the I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. That's me at the Tucson airport. And then finally he screams out, I'm not blanking leaving. So I'll play it a little bit later. I did share it on the Facebook subscriber page. I'm not leaving. The show goes on. So, but that's how I feel. That's how I feel. Um, like I said, I don't even understand the question. Thank you, Marie, who sends a super sticker. All right, I love this. Look at YouTube, just really continues to grow. Kelly, thank you, Kelly. John, hey, John, love your coverage. I appreciate that. You guys are really going to like today because we have some great guests, and I always try to. And thank you, Tea Time. Thank you for being there. Starting to look at construction workers, motive. That is exactly right. Buy a Gatorade. Thank you, Tea Time. Um, I will do that as long as there's no sugar in it. So, but I think that, and we'll ask Jen about that with the construction, simply because the FBI they seem convinced that this is someone that what brought someone brought them to the area. And I was speaking with a member of law enforcement last night that said, you know, construction workers. That's an interesting angle because you get used to seeing them in the neighborhood, but they don't live in the neighborhood and they don't belong in the neighborhood. And it's an interesting dynamic because you start to, oh, okay, that's just the man that's working on the house down the street, or that's the man that's doing some electrical work. I find that a lot of people are starting to, um, okay, uh, Hold on one moment. Okay. Um, I think a lot of people are starting to question and take notice of people that come into their neighborhood or even their house, really. And then they start to say, I actually don't really know that individual. Thank you, Alicia. Yes, Hope for Nancy is right. Um, I can tell you that I was speaking with a woman last night when I was on my afternoon walk. And thank you, Alicia. And she was saying that this whole thing that people are not understanding the fear that has gripped this area. The fear that people of thank you, Finley, new member. The fear that this woman said, like day and night now, she lives alone. She has one of those security doors that you see up there that Nancy also had. So a lot of people have the regular door, and then they have it's not a screen door, but it's like it's very strong security door. And from what I understand, they're heavy and they lock, and so a lot of people, you could understand why Nancy wouldn't use that, or a lot of people. And this woman, she said her children and her grandchildren are now texting her several times a day and FaceTime. And she wakes up in the morning, she has a text from her daughter, and then in midday she gets a text from her granddaughter, and then her son checks in on her, then her daughter-in-law checks in on her. And she said that, now that there's people that live here and live alone, they've lived alone for a long time. There's a lot of elderly that live. This is, by the way, I can't say enough good things about the Catalina foothills. Nancy, you're looking at her home. What a beautiful spot, a beautiful quality of life that she was enjoying. But what I think is also lost, this one woman was saying she thinks that the sheriff should come out here, Sheriff Nanos, and do like a community meeting with the people to assure them that they're safe. Because in that Today Show interview, he said he could strike again. And that really scared people. And as this woman said to me, they said that if this could happen to Nancy Guthrie, whose daughter is a celebrity, that thank you, Neil Moore. Thank you. That thank you for all folks, all those super chats. That they view it as like, well, it could happen to anybody because they view Savannah as, Savannah, this happened. She got the call from her sister and then said, I'm on my way out there. But then she talked with Senator Mark Kelly. So they view not so much Nancy, but just Savannah as, and she's a very well known person. She's a celebrity. She's well paid for what she does. And so they kind of view it as like, if this could happen to her, then this could kind of happen to anybody. But but it's real fear that has gripped. And then as I've also talked about, and I was mentioning this when I was on Court TV with the great Julie Grant, which is the biggest boom for business out here has been the alarm and security business. Every time I go around a corner, there is another truck that's installing either cameras or alarms, and people have all kinds of security and things like that. It's something else that I've kind of pointed out to people is one of the benefits of. So I continually walk around here. I walk a lot anyway. Normally, just during the course of my family and friends know this, but I on a normal week, I I do somewhere around 150,000 steps. So I generally do at least 20,000 steps a day. Sometimes it'll exceed 22,000, 23,000, somewhere in that ballpark. And one of the benefits I find, especially when you're walking, when you're driving, you don't pick up on things a lot of times. When you walk, I find you notice things. And one of the things I notice is I could, if I were to take you on a walk and do a map, I could show you every house that has a dog because they bark when I go by. Thank you to Melanie. Yes, former Mass resident. Thank you very much, Melanie. I miss all my friends in Massachusetts. I missed a great event last week in Mass, but I am committed to be out here on the story. So but that's one of the things that and again, like you have to do with this type of coverage. I try to you have to do what works for you. And And what I have found is this is something I've learned is just you learn a lot by being on the ground and being accessible and talking to people. And by the way, make no mistake about it. The scoop I had yesterday, I'm not, I don't kid myself. If if News Nation was still here, they would have gone to Brian. And if Fox was still here, they probably would have gone to Fox. If whoever. So if a network was here, they may feed the info. Now, the only thing is, right now, it is right. I'm the it's the Johnny D show. It's JDP. I'm JDP only one on the scene. Suddenly now people that would maybe be talking to NBC or talking to some of the networks, it's kind of like what they say in the nightclub business. Everybody looks good at closing time. Um, or you who's at the dance, and so that's the way that I kind of view it. So now I want to check. So okay, hold on. Uh, um, I want to just check something. Okay, I just because um, people get a little confused on the time difference. And just if they try to say what time they're going to join us, I think there was confusion on the time. Um, okay, let me just see if we're going to hear from her. And it can happen. Like I try to figure out, all right, where are you? And then we'll try to. Um, Let me just double check here. Okay, I think we have a little bit of confusion here. Oh, good. Okay. Um, Bear with me, everybody. Yeah. Later today, it's going to be, I think the heat could impact, not eliminate, but impact. You can't ignore when you're out here and they put out a heat advisory, it's it's nothing to ignore, that's for sure. So let me just see. I'm not exactly sure what I was in such a good role. Yeah. This afternoon, this afternoon is going to be all right. So this afternoon, starting around 2 o'clock, it's going to be 95 degrees. But tomorrow is going to be 100, Friday 102, Saturday 101, and then Sunday 97. And it's Monday 94, Tuesday 94, Wednesday, Thursday 99, 98. So I am okay. I don't know why she is not there. And let me just double check. I apologize, folks. Thank you to Pamela. Thank you, Pamela. Also, wait, maybe I'll do YouTube more often. Yes. Thank you, Alicia. Where is my guest? I don't understand what's happening here. She's a great guest. I said, all right, 10 minutes. I'm not sure what happened. I don't know. Hmm. I don't want to call her. Could make the phone ring. Just so then I want to double check. I apologize, everybody. Okay, I sent the leak. That went through. So maybe I'll just do a ring and hang up. Just so that maybe she'll check the phone. Okay. Well, we do have some developments, which are good. And I also thank you, everybody. We do have a good guest at the top of the hour. I'm not exactly sure what happened because we. Hey, are you ready to jump on? Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no problem. Just I. Oh, okay. We we could. Okay, we could do it tomorrow if you like. Could do it tomorrow if that. Okay, jump on now, just for 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, okay, sounds good. Okay, all right. She's gonna join. Hey, things happen, right? That's why I'm flexible and patient. We try to be. So again, I recognize this case, and it is the Nancy Guthrie case, and um, it is day 46. I want to repeat, and I will say this to Jen, but you can't ignore. They are convinced that it was someone that came into this area for a reason. You know what else I want to mention, everybody? And again, we are live on both Facebook and YouTube. Next hour is a little unusual, where I actually do a radio show, and we're going to be live on the radio. A lot of people are, don't do that. We'll be live on the radio for the next hour. So then people will be listening live on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM. And then it's also live on my website, depetro.com. We will stay live here on Facebook and YouTube. And I think maybe we will start to do more broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube. I have been doing TikTok live in the afternoon, but the problem with TikTok is that app, it eats up so much data that you don't get all. We run into seemingly not a lot of problems with Wi-Fi on Facebook and YouTube, but we do run into problems on TikTok. So, but if you go to the website, depetro.com, you can also, it's linked to all of social media. And so with social media, as far as, the YouTube page, Instagram page, everything like that. And then also obviously TikTok and Facebook and YouTube. So I like to, try to cover as many platforms as possible. I'm also, I think of myself more as a content creator as opposed to just a streamer. And that's nothing against, I just think they're a little bit different. A lot of times streamers just all they do is YouTube. Someone said to me, "Are you one of them YouTubers?" I said, "Not exactly. I don't think of myself as a YouTuber. I mean, I have a good following in YouTube. I really like YouTube, but I also the reason why you see the camera shot the way you do is because it allows me to then have guests, and so I use StreamYard, and so it just kind of works best like that. I do understand on YouTube you can kind of do a join me. People do listen. People do all different types of coverage that works for them. This is also a matter kind of finding your groove a little bit. But I think the fact that they're drilling down on someone that had access to this area, someone who came into this area. I think it's very interesting the comment that someone made to me, which is the construction people that come in, there you people get comfortable seeing them. Oh, that's just the guy working on the roof across the street. That's just the woman that comes in who's a nurse's aide, but they're not, they don't live here. They're visitors here, and they definitely come in here, but they don't, I don't want to say they don't belong, but you really don't know that much about their background. And I've heard from people that live in the area, they're starting to say, you know, who is that? The pool guy does, sometimes he comes in, sometimes he's got one or two people with them. Who are those people? Or the landscaper. Yeah, this guy comes in, he handles my gardening and landscaping, but sometimes he's got one or two guys, and I don't know who they are, and I don't talk to them. And they're looking over my property, and they see where we have cameras, and they see that I'm, walking around here alone in my house in my bathrobe. And then the same thing of, this woman said, a couple of weeks ago, a nurse's aide, she's a nurse's aide, and the woman, whatever reason, was sick or out of town or something happened. So suddenly someone she didn't know showed up, and she wouldn't have thought much about it prior to the, um, oh, wow. Okay. Um, wow. This is, let me try it again. Um, hmm, nope. Okay. We're really having a problem with this, but I am convinced that we are going to work it out. I don't know why. Uh, okay. We should have her momentarily. And we're only going to chat for like 5 or 10 minutes because then I'm the guest at the top of the hour. Hmm. And then you're really going to like the next two guests once we have Jen on. We're only going to keep her for like 5 minutes because then I don't want to throw things off at the top of the hour. But just to thread the needle on that. Oh, good. Here we go. All right, folks, joining us are, she is fantastic. And there she is, my friend, retired former FBI, Jennifer Coffendaffer. Jen, first of all, you look magnificent. Sorry I missed you last Friday, but I want to just jump in. We won't keep it that long, but I'm very intrigued if you would just expand a little bit. I loved what you were digging in on the billboard placement and what that may tell us.
Right. I thought it was very interesting. And I actually have done a little bit more research. And I found out that I think those billboards, a lot of them went up toward the beginning of the case in the beginning of February. It doesn't really change my stance necessarily. But I did want to make that caveat that is, it was not, they were not put up in March per se, which would be even more concerning. But what it tells me is when they decided to put those billboards up, they didn't keep several things into account. First of all, did they keep into account the Spanish population that exists in California, in Arizona, and in Houston area where most of the billboards are, or a great deal of them are, and in Texas? These billboards should be in Spanish. Secondarily, in my belief, Nancy Guthrie would not have been exposed by whoever took her. In other words, they weren't walking around Central Market with her. Rather, she would have never been seen for the last time by them, and never seen again by anybody, even if she were right now alive and kept in captive. That's nobody would see them. But who they would see, John, would be Porch Guy. So to me, the importance of billboards are to get the face of the perpetrator out, not the face of the victim. So those were kind of the things. And then the other thing, of course, was concerning, less concerning now that we know it was in earlier February, but certainly concerning that it's such a shotgun approach. In other words, it made it clear to me that they had no idea what happened to Nancy.
Um, Jen, what do you make of just some of the recent developments with the FBI and how they're canvassing, seemingly looking at possible construction crews that could have been working in the area? Or, uh, you know, again, a lot of people report tips to the FBI. There was a neighbor that I was familiar with that had said, "Hey, there was a house, and there were three guys living here, and they seem a little sketchy, and they moved out immediately after this happened with Nancy." Okay, that's one thing to tell the FBI, but what was different was we learned that the FBI actually went to this woman's home and then wanted more details about these individuals. She told me they even showed her some photographs. She didn't want to go into much more detail, but what does that just those two developments of recent FBI interviews tell us?
Well, first of all, I would be astounded, quite frankly, if the FBI hadn't already looked into construction workers that were working in the area. That would be on a top priority list in terms of doing any canvassing of that area. I would want to know what transient slash construction workers, construct people who work construction, oftentimes, particularly if they work on a crew for a particular company or a particular contractor, they can be more transient. That is just the fact of the matter. It's not saying anything negative. It's just saying they have a skill set that they can do anywhere, anytime for anyone who is willing to pay. And so, for those reasons, they become a little bit more transient. And when you look at that, it's very important that the FBI would be following up on any and all construction workers, especially when you keep into account other cases that have happened, like the case of the other woman who she was in her actually only her late 60s, so she wasn't what I would consider an elderly woman. But she had a construction worker working at her home that ended up going in there, again, not masked, not in the same modus operandi, but certainly went to her house and sexually assaulted her, and then took her and murdered her outside the home. So when you look at cases like that, and that's my understanding, I know I saw someplace else where they said no, she was murdered in the home. My understanding is she was murdered outside the home. Nevertheless, took her, and so again, that was a construction worker. So you would want to look at anyone and everyone that wasn't usual to that neighborhood, but was in that neighborhood for some period of time doing specialized work.
We're going to talk to Jen at greater length on another day. But before I let you go, Jen, and first of all, great to see you. Thank you for jumping on. But where do you, without going through the whole case all over, but the recent, the sheriff doing the interview with the Today Show, which is basically Savannah's network, and they're the only ones that seemingly have real access to him right now. But him saying, we believe we know the motive. We feel pretty sure he did why he did what he did, and it's the same theory we've had since day one. Just how do you interpret that to where they are right now with the investigation?
Well, that was a huge, to me, a big point he made.
Yep.
And, my understanding is it might have been made, if you watch the interview, it's sort of, I don't want to say an afterthought, but certainly a point that is driven home at the conclusion of sort of the colloquy between the two. And so when you look at that, it seemed like a point he was driving home. And his point is basically how I interpreted it was kidnapping for ransom that went south. In other
Yep.
words, not that we ever even saw a legitimate ransom note necessarily, but that was the purpose, that was the motive. And to me, that's how I took that. Um, I don't know if that's how he meant it, but that's certainly how I construed it.
But also, I just want to add, I don't want to say I know, but I've met the NBC reporter did the interview. She's based out of the West Coast, and you notice for those that watch the package, maybe people don't pay his attention, but you don't see him saying that. It's my understanding they wrapped the interview. It was done over Zoom, but then before they aired it, he wanted them to essentially include that. So Liz, who did the interview, she mentions that at the end about they've had that theory since day one. But he didn't say that for whatever reason when they were doing it live. So I agree with you. Jennifer, how can people follow your great work? Because as you know, I am such a fan and you are so brilliant. You have incredible insight. How can other people follow and discover your great work?
Well, John, I want to say too, thank you for being out there. Thank you for staying on this. I know as different priorities come up and as this case appears to go cold in the media, it doesn't mean it's going cold behind the scenes. There's a lot
No,
still going on. And I appreciate all you're doing out there and the hard work you're doing and all of your followers and people that I see in this chat. So thank you to all of you. I'm on for X/old Twitter at Coffindaffer FBI. And as far as a YouTube channel, I have Break the Case with Jen Coffindaffer that we're kind of transitioning over to true crime with Jen Coffindaffer, just a little bit easier. And so, in any event, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. And John, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
absolutely. No, we'll have you back. And one thing I want to share with you, Jen, is because I've been talking with some of the media, the national media, but when the situation with Iran happened, immediately the knee jerk reaction was, okay, we got to pull our resources out of the Guthrie case and send them there. But someone that works with a major network told me yesterday, but what they're finding is anything they put about the Guthrie case, and they can track how the stories do, are rocketing on their website and they're outperforming the any coverage on Iran. So I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see more of them trickle in. You notice that, Nancy Grace and also Megyn Kelly, they're jumping headfirst into it. I think the public interest is still there. I think the networks are starting to second guess their decision to pull some of the troops out. Jennifer, it's so great to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you, John.
All right, folks, there she is. And she is, believe me, Jen Coffindaffer. She is very, very experienced and have, such great insight. And it is really just such a treat to be able to talk to her. Now, coming up, and again, folks, we continue our coverage. It is I always have to keep checking, but it is day 46. Thank you to Molly Smith with the super sticker. And Marie, thank you. Remember, if you're watching on Facebook, you can send stars. Obviously, with YouTube, you can send the super stickers and the super chats. Listen, right now, as we pan, everyone does, it's 5 minutes to the hour, and everyone does different forms of coverage, or they set their style and time of coverage. But this is different. As someone that was out here since and I did an interview the day, NBC News, then next to them was Fox, then ABC was right there, then CBS was right there, then NBC was right there on the end, and then there was California, LA stations, California stations were here, local station was there, and then it was NBC, CNN was there. At the end, News Nation moved down there, but initially News Nation, Brian, they were down on the end. And as you can see, they have all, as I've said, I think it was a mistake. I know, the networks decided, oh, my goodness, we're at war in Iran. We need to go there. But from my own personal, and that's one of the benefits, quite frankly, of being an independent is I don't have anyone saying, I think you should go cover this. I think you should go cover that. And if they do, it's not, you know, it's not greeted. Um, I just ignore it, basically. I ignore it. I mean, I do have people. Of course, I have people. I don't know why. How much longer? When are you cut? Like, no, this is the story right now. The earliest right now, just for those of you that are following, um, I mean, at Easter, I certainly want to see, I have a beautiful family and so forth. I want to see them. I miss them, but I think I'm here till at least Easter, and then I will go to spend Easter with my family, go to church and have a nice brunch and get a chance because I do miss seeing my children that are in the Northeast, in Washington, D.C., and also um, in New York, obviously. If you follow my middle child, Kate, who has developed a big following with her work at Fox. But as far as I'm concerned, especially, and I'll tell you why, when you have the FBI around and you have the FBI and they're very, very active right now, we want to We want to be here. You want that type of coverage. Now, I want to also just let you know before our time is done, and I think I may go a little bit longer than we've been. I think we may be up here for a while, is what I'm saying. And then we'll see how it goes this afternoon with the heat in TikTok. But we're going to talk to Morgan Wright. Um, he is the CEO and founder, National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases. And he's also the editor and host, Crime Reconstructed Substack podcast. He has really, really good insight. He's going to join us top of the hour. And then I'm very intrigued. A little bit later, we're going to talk with Nerdy Addict, who is phenomenal, very, very talented on X. And he has just been like right there posting so much great info and breaks things down. And we're going to talk to him. It'll be my first time chatting with him. Morgan, I saw when I was out here, Fox had him at the sheriff's station, but Nerdy Addict has just been amazing. And Nerdy Addict also got a shout out with the Megyn Kelly show um, just the other day because of some of the things that he was posting. But you're going to like Morgan Wright. Folks, my take on this is listen, this is an unsolved case. I call it, I think it's the biggest mystery in the world right now. Unless you want to get into, are they going to be able to reopen the straits? But I don't know if that's a mystery. It's certainly the biggest mystery in the country right now. It's the most unsolved, high profile crime. And I'm very, very intrigued, like everyone else, to see how this whole thing is going to play out because there's so many different factions to this. And there's, it has had many twists and turns. And what I also try to remind people, and by being here on the ground, you get a sense of that. What I find interesting about this, and when I have covered and followed police, my thing that I learned early on is you just follow where the police are. And many times with missing persons, like people would say to me, "Oh, Nancy liked to go like hiking, and I don't know about that, but into the mountains." Well, it doesn't matter when Nancy wanted to go. It's whoever abducted her. You follow where the police are searching. Remember, they know more than we know. So I just follow where the police are. And the police have not left this general area. Now, one thing about criminals that I learned with some of the missing persons, and it was taught to me by police, they go where they know, which means when it's, midnight or 1 in the morning or something's happened, they don't suddenly start thinking, maybe I'll go to this state or region that I've never been to, and that's where I'm going to dispose of someone. No, they're in a panic. They go where they know. And so a big part of this, obviously, is they've been unable to figure out who is this person. And then once they determine that, who is that in the mask, then they could start to go into exactly, what happened to poor Nancy. Now, folks, joining us right now, he is the CEO and founder, National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases. He is also editor and host Crime Reconstructed Substack and podcast. He is really, really impressive. I mentioned when I first arrived, I saw him. He was at the sheriff's station, and like everyone, he's just one of those guests. You stop what you're doing, and we're thrilled that he's taking the time to join us. And it's Morgan Wright. Morgan, John DePietro. First of all, really, really, your insight is really remarkable, and your work speaks for itself. I'm very curious to hear, and we'll go through it a little bit. Just some of your thoughts, general overview, where you think we are right now with this Nancy Guthrie investigation.
Hey, first of all, John, thank you for the kind words and thank you for having me on. When this all started, one of the initial premises, so in my Crime Reconstructed Substack, I use first principles. I mean, the whole thing I talk about is rebuilding cold cases through first principles and modern intelligence. I come out of a background of law enforcement, intelligence, justice. And so the biggest question, right, that we had to deal with early on, John, was it an abduction gone wrong, or was it never, or was it a burglary gone wrong, or was it never a burglary? And so many people want it to be one thing or the other. So, but the more that time has gone on, what I said was if it's a burglary that's gone wrong, then what what conditions had to exist inside that house for the quote burglar to think that kidnapping was less risky than fleeing? I've worked hundreds of burglary cases. I've worked kidnapping cases. I've worked, a variety of things, and they're rare. I mean, they're exceedingly rare to where somebody who intended on burglarizing a home automatically flips because, John, the thing too, it changes the logistics, it changes the planning, it changes the mindset. So if we take the sheriff's timeline, and this kind of gets into where we are, because I'm going to stake that out in a second, gets into the sheriff's timeline. If what they say is accurate, if 212 was there was activity inside the house and 228 the pacemaker failed to ping, we have a 16-minute window, which means in that 16-minute window, the offender had a violent confrontation with Nancy Guthrie. We know because there's blood leading out the door. In 16
Yep.
minutes, decided, I need to get transportation. We know there had to be a car involved because there's exfiltration, there's egress out of the area. They had to arrange logistics. So with that, you're also looking at too, then the probability is there's a second person. So, and then you have to look for what are the signals of theft interrupted. We've worked burglaries before where a homeowner isn't expected to be home, or they come in and you've got some of the loot and the booty already gathered up. And there's also staged crime scenes. So when I look at all of this, and you made a point right before we went on there, you said, we don't know what the police knows. We don't know what the sheriff's office knows. That's key because a lot of people are trying to fill in the missing gap. And when you do that, you end up with what I call the Jurassic Park syndrome. You try and fill in that gap of DNA, but it creates unintended consequences.
Mm.
So where I think we are right now, I started saying the quiet part out loud when I was there because I said either it's a burglary that gone wrong or it was never a burglary. And if it's a targeted abduction, you look for three things. You look for entry, which is either forced or consensual. You look for control, and then you look for exfiltration. And part of exfiltration is logistics and infrastructure. If you take somebody and that's your purpose, you have to have a way to get them out of there, a way to support them. So early on, I was saying you've got an 84-year-old victim, cardiac compromised, violent confrontation in the middle of the night, living alone. I had no illusions at that point about whether or not I thought she was alive. I said, what we should do instead is start treating this as a no-body homicide. We should start looking for, it's hard to have clandestine grave sites out there, John, because that area of you've been out there, it's hard packed. It's very difficult to dig.
Yes.
And plus you're wanting to get out of there, right? So you're either
Yep.
looking for open grave sites or concealed grave sites. So I think where we are on day 46 is all of the people who said the guy looks like an amateur, he's a moron, been 46 days and still not caught. So I think we
Right.
were dealing with somebody who was comfortable in the trade craft they were doing.
Folks, again, we're speaking with Morgan Wright. Let's talk about the time that the confrontation. So it's possible they weren't expecting a violent confrontation. It happened, and then possibly communicating to another party, I need you to get up here. We're gonna, for whatever reason, we're gonna remove her. We need transportation to get her out of this home.
Yeah, see, John, that would be inconsistent if it were a burglary gone wrong because,
Okay.
yeah, look, I used to teach behavior analysis. I taught out at the National Security Agency. I talked to the FBI, the CIA. I used to teach interview and interrogation to law enforcement. I went through the original violent criminal apprehension program with the FBI, went through their behavior analysis courses. And so what you look at is you don't look at just one thing. You look at over all of these cases, right? Not just the ones that I work, but the ones that you're familiar with the reporting. I personally don't know of a case to where we knew it was adjudicated that the person was going in to commit a burglary, ran into the homeowner, and decided that kidnapping them was less risky than fleeing. Now, there have been
Mm.
confrontations, unfortunately, that have turned violent to where the intruder attacked the homeowner, stabbed them, but then they
Yep.
leave, right? So you think of
Right.
human behavior. You have something unexpected, John. What do? It's fight or flight. And most of these people flee. They might have an initial fight, but then what does human behavior tell you? Flee. Unless it was a home invasion, because you expect to go in there and have a confrontation and do control, or it was a targeted abduction. But if it's a burglary, I want somebody to show me a case to where they show that this is consistent with how burglars do things. It's not, because I've worked hundreds of these.
Okay. Outside the home, people were talking about that front door. Many of the homes around here, they have it's like a security door that you could, for whatever reason, you could even leave your door open. But then it's not a screen that I'm used to in the Northeast, but
Right.
it's more because there's no bugs. But it is definitely a security door. But all the drones have been up. We don't see a broken window in the back. We don't see that that door was banged in. Someone was trying to say possibly like bang their way through. What does that tell us in your view of how the intruder initially got into the home?
So I saw some of the drone video where they flew around, different stations, different networks. I
Yep.
was out there for 4 days, looking at a lot of this stuff. There was no, when I say there's no apparent indication of forced entry, because it didn't, you can see that windows are broken or a door that's been damaged. But what we
Right.
have to remember, Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. I mean,
Yep.
I forget to lock. I mean, I chastise myself. I'll wake up in the morning and realize I left my garage door open all night. So
Sure.
it is not unlikely to think is that there was no forced entry into the home, not because the offender had any insight. It's just simply you get lucky sometimes. And when you try the first, when we used to do search warrants, I say before you kick the door in, have you tried opening the door?
Yeah.
There's no need to kick it in if the door's open. So, but you think of an 84-year-old woman, I said living by herself. Sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. You get complacent in your routines, and you think you've locked something, but you haven't. And so it's possible that the person tried the front door, that wasn't successful, and they went around to the side and got in through a side door. I don't know about a window. See, if you get in through a window, John, there's another thing too. It's called Locard's exchange principle. Here's a
Yep.
here's a piece of forensic trivia. Dr. Emil Locard, but it's really good in forensic cases or in cases like this. Anytime you come in contact with something, you leave something and you take something with you. So that's touch DNA, epithelial cells, but that's also dirt and debris. So if you're climbing in through a window, you're going to drag debris off the window into the home, or you're going to take something in the home out with you. You're going to see disturbances. So I don't know that I saw any disturbances around windows. I think the most likely entry, I mean, based on what I've seen, the lack of even reporting on this, I think it's going to be a door that was unintentionally left open,
Hmm.
and that led to access to the home.
There's definitely sliding glass doors. It's funny you mentioned that, Morgan. A neighbor that I talked to 2 weeks ago, because one thing that I've really had to adjust to is how much the temperature drops when the sun goes down. I mean, it's cold at night. You need a jacket. It's
I
cold
was
in the morning.
freezing when I was
Yeah.
down there. It was cold in the evening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as hot as it is. But what this woman told me was they leave their sliding glass door open at night to get the night air that comes in. So again, you talk about, people fall into a habit. If you don't mind, can we talk about the nature of, because I find it so intriguing. How did this, if this was a burglary gone wrong, how did it turn into an abduction? And just your experience, what would be the scenarios where someone would either make a second decision that this person needed to be abducted, or does this point more to the entire purpose of this was to abduct Nancy Guthrie?
Yeah, I don't like to talk in absolutes, John, because you never
Okay.
know. Because well, here's why: we don't know what's inside the house, and the house to
Yes.
me is that missing link. It's that missing piece of the DNA that if you get inside the house and you can clearly see if it was a staged crime scene, which I've worked homicides. I'm actually working some cold cases with some agencies to where the FBI's behavioral analysis unit came. It was their conclusion. It was other people. It was a staged crime scene. So if it's a staged crime scene leads itself towards a targeted abduction, and you're disguising the abduction as a burglary gone wrong because you want to be focusing, you want law enforcement to focus on people that are burglars, that are known burglars, as opposed to
Okay.
somebody who's there to do abduction. If once, and again, we should not know what's going on inside the house because that's law enforcement's holdback. That's what's going to make or break this case. But what I will talk is on the one hand, if it's that, and on the other hand, if it's this. So if it's not a staged crime scene and there's signals of theft inside the house to where you can see them collecting things, getting ready to put it into a backpack, or you're collecting valuables, it's hard for me. So I've thought through this. It's hard to come up with the scenario again that says what conditions would have to exist inside the house for somebody who was intent on burglary to think that abduction was less risky than just fleeing, just getting out of there.
Right.
Because even if you said, "Hey, look, she might have recognized the person," well, they had a firearm. They could have just shot her right there and left.
Right.
And I will tell you, from a risk standpoint, when I was a state trooper, There were people that just drove 1 mile too far, and I got a hold of them, and we got tons of dope, we got money, we got
Mm,
guns, and there's a thing on geographic profiling, it's called distance decay. When you look at, like, serial offenders and serial crimes, they will only go out to a certain distance. That distance starts to decay because the risk increases the farther out you go. You look at Gary Ridgway, a friend of mine is Dave Reichert. He was the lead investigator on the Green River killer. When they went back now and looked at all of Gary Ridgway's cases, there is absolute distance decay. They can now target two areas that he operated out of, where he lived and where he worked. And so criminals are they are susceptible to human behavior the way you and I are. So you look at, and the other thing you look at too, John, is that your abilities do not increase under stress; they decrease, they degrade under stress. That's when you look at. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good shot. I still go out to the range, but I
mm,
will tell you, it's much different when you're shooting at a paper target versus when somebody's shooting at you and you're shooting back. That
mm.
change, stress changes everything. So stress changes your calculation. So I go back to, what conditions have to exist inside the house for somebody committing burglary to think that kidnapping was less risky than just fleeing?
The Sheriff Danos, did an interview that aired on the Today Show on Friday. And so NBC, Savannah's network, seems to be right now, Morgan, the only source, which I kind of understand. But he did an interview with the Today Show, and he said in that interview, and it was the first time he's talked about it, he said, "We believe we know what his motive was." And then they finish the interview, and then he contacts the reporter and says, "Oh, so you can include," and she did include in the package. Um, and the sheriff said it's basically the same theory they developed from day one. So I'm curious, what does that tell you, that on that first day, Sunday, February 1st, the sheriff's here at the house, he's with his investigative team. According to him, his words now, they develop a theory on motive, and now here it is 46 days later, and they feel that they were right on that day one. I'm just curious, what might they have seen inside the house? Because that's the only information they had at the time. They didn't even have the image of the guy in the mask on the porch, from the Nest Cam. What might they have seen where it sounds like right from there they developed, okay, we know what motive was?
I think that's when you go to a crime scene. The other thing you do, at least what I used to do, is before you just run in and start searching for everything, you step back because you have to get a sense of what's in there, whether it's a homicide, a sexual assault, even a burglary. And you look for signs, you look for signals that show that it's one type of thing or another. And so, based on what he said, if what he said is true, and again, it doesn't matter what we believe. All that matters is what must be true for that to be
Right.
accurate. So, what must be true for that to be accurate is you would have to see something inside the house that clearly shows there was no staging, or if it was either a staged crime scene, or there were no indication of theft. In other words, there was nothing gathered. I know they talked about, well, her watch was taken, um, but what you're looking for inside the house, were there valuables, were there cash, were there things that could be easily converted, because that's the target of a burglar, right? What do you go in there? You're not going in there to sign autographs and make yourself a sandwich, although I did have a
Right.
burglar do that once. He was hungry,
Wow.
but you're there to steal stuff, right? That's your objective. That's what burglars do. They burgle, they thieve. And so what they could have seen inside the house were signals that indicated that this was a targeted abduction. If it's a targeted abduction, then what you're looking at, they already had exfiltration set up. They had transportation arranged. Because look, even though she's 84 years old and she weighs, I think they said 150 pounds, I will tell you that's still going to take two people, one for transportation, one for control. It is not
Yep.
an easy thing to do, to take a single person out of a house, and then you're looking at, capability. And then if that's the case, then they were prepared to do that, which then signals their tradecraft and their intent. So they're again, I go back to, right, what's the missing DNA? It's whatever inside the house. That's the key to the statement that he made. And if what he says is accurate, then you have to say what must be true. And what must be true are the things that indicate that it was either a staged crime scene and there were no signals of theft, or there's a clear indication that this was a targeted abduction.
Now, Morgan, both the sheriff and then Savannah even mentioned, like, taken right out of her bed. He said that initially, and then he walked it back. Sheriff Nanoson essentially said, well, I didn't mean it. I meant it figuratively. But then Savannah did a video and she talked about her mom plucked right out of the bed. Is it possible that inside the home, of which people need to remember, the family arrived here after her friends called her. She didn't show up at 11 o'clock. Her friend called, her friend texted. That was the article in the New York Times. The family comes over. They immediately call the sheriff. What does that tell us that, or what clues could be there if both Savannah and the sheriff are initially, they seem to be basically coming out and saying that whatever happened, that she literally, they get the impression that she was taken right from her bed.
So when you walk that back a little bit and you say, okay, what does that indicate? So let's look at it from the mind of a burglar. There's an actual real technique. It's called windthropping. It's what the uh, MI6 and it's what Scotland Yard used to do when they were confronting the IRA, and the Royal Ulster Constabulary did it. It's you get into the mind of the offender, you look for what would the offender do. So if I'm looking through the mind of the offender and I'm in there, I probably kind of have an idea where a bedroom is, but I don't, but my target is to not be detected, right? So I want to stay away from that bedroom. So the reason I'm saying that, think about this. If you heard somebody in your house, what would you do? Well, you'd flip the covers back. Think about how you would act, right? You'd flip the covers back, you'd get up, and you may go to see what happened in some form or fashion. The difference between that is if you were asleep and I reached in, John, while you were sleeping and I grabbed you out of your bed, the sheets are going to look different. The covers are going to look different. The position of the
Okay.
pillows are going to be different than if you just simply folded the sheets back and got out of bed to see what was going on. That's where somebody might interpret, because there's layers, right? There's a reality layer. Then I talk about there's an evidence layer, an interpretation layer, and a narrative layer. And too often, Johns, people go right to the narrative. They skip the interpretation. And interpretation and theories are meant to be hypotheses. They're meant to be tested. And if it doesn't survive that test, you go back and reformulate before you get to a narrative. But in this case, if I were looking at that, one of the things I would look at to say, was this person taken out of their bed forcibly? Or the other explanation could be is that they approached in there, they had a weapon, and they made her get out of the bed. I mean, that could look the same as somebody getting out of bed voluntarily to see what was going on in the house. So again, we don't know everything inside the house, but I would say here's what I would say. If you had the evidence that showed that the sheets were in disarray, that it looked like the sheets were dragged onto the floor, that's more consistent with somebody being dragged out of their bed than what people normally do, which is throw the sheets back, step out of bed, maybe put a house coat on or slippers, and then go see what's
Right.
going on.
Morgan, I won't keep you much longer. It's so insightful, though. But could you just touch on the high risk element of someone going into a home while the homeowner is there? Now, granted, I've covered when there's a home invasion. And normally, when I've covered a situation where there'd been a home invasion, it's normally someone who had been in the house many times that had been in exchange, like a drug deal. They buy a certain amount of drugs and then they're going to go back into the house. They're going to get their cash back. So then they've not only got the drugs, but then they get the money they paid for them. But the nature of someone in the dark to go in with a homeowner there. I mean, how do they know she's not still awake? How do they know she doesn't dial 911? I ride with police. Many times there's a dispatcher comes over and says there's a homeowner. They think they hear someone downstairs in their home. I mean, that happens like every night. If you could just touch on the high risk nature of someone going in while the homeowner is there, that is not something that you see a lot.
No, and I go back to take a look at the video, take a look at the tradecraft. What did they had? They had a backpack on, they had gloves, very well concealed, but
Yep.
they also had a bite light. So they wanted both of
Yes.
their hands free. If I'm doing a targeted abduction, like you were talking about home invasions, I did a whole session on my Crime Reconstructed Substack on Saturday with a friend of mine named Pete Friselli, retired from ATF. He worked home invasions in Tucson and in Phoenix area, and we talked about this specifically. And so when I look at the tradecraft, when I look at that person, I look at somebody saying they wanted both hand frees, they have a bite light. Is that consistent with burglary or is that consistent with targeted abduction? That's the hard part we don't know right now, John. But I will tell you, just back to your point, for somebody to not know, well, here's the other thing, for somebody to not know if somebody's home, because that's risky right there. If you know somebody's gone, it's like the mistake people make when they post stuff on social media. Hey, I'm having fun in Cancun. Look at me. What means
Right.
it tells me you're not home. Less risk there. But if you got back a day early, And you didn't expect that. That's that confrontation. So it is very high risk, and and I'm telling you, when I see the behavior of that person on that front porch, that's somebody that's comfortable standing there. They're not worried about being detected. They've done this before. People say, well, they weren't expecting the camera. I'm telling you, folks, that he expected the camera. So does every
Mm.
other burglar out there. All you have to do is check your Nest and your Ring cameras of your neighborhood and see people posting about auto burglaries. Even kids, these 16 and 17-year-olds, they're not concerned about the cameras. They know they're there. So what do? They wear a hoodie, they wear a mask,
Yep.
something. So that's like DNA. Everybody knows about DNA now. So everybody knows about these cases. But back to your final point, it is one of the most high risk things that you can do, which is to go into a place knowing that it's occupied, and because that only leaves you with you're going to be able to either you're going to be able to get in and get out undetected, or you're going to get in and be discovered and be able to flee before there's a confrontation, or you're going to break in, get discovered, and then have a confrontation. But each one of those, the risk on that goes up. If I were a burglar, and I'm not, just want everybody to know, but I would be one of those people. If I'm just there to burgle and steal stuff, man, the first time I hear a homeowner moving, I'm out of there. You know why? Because by the nature of burglary, you don't want the violent confrontation. You're not doing a home invasion, as you said.
Right.
I'm not there to do an abduction. I'm just there to steal stuff and get the hell out. So that there's a missing piece here that once it's filled in, it'll make sense. But the reason it doesn't make sense, uncertainty is okay. But the reason it doesn't make sense, we don't have what's inside that house that could clearly potentially differentiate between targeted abduction versus burglary gone wrong.
So, Morgan, if you had access to the crime scene, what the sheriff and the investigators saw, you would be able to, you'd get a much clearer idea of what you think took place here.
I would if it was on day one.
Yeah.
It's like the pristine
Okay.
crime scene, like showing up right
Sure.
now. Yeah, now I mean, obviously, and I'm not trying to be literal what you say, but I said, look, if I went there now, even if you go there now, it would give you a better idea of movement through the house. What were points of entry, right? And based on that points of entry, what could have been detected? And if Nancy's 84 years old, we need to find out, is she a light sleeper or not? Is she a heavy sleeper? I think I saw one of the comments going across saying somebody said that she had hearing aids. I mean, I've got
Yes.
hearing aids. I take those out at night. Are some people light sleepers? Are they heavy sleepers? Do they take medication? I mean, these are so many things that we have to know before we can infer that Nancy should have heard somebody or may have heard somebody. Some people, they could sleep through an alarm going off.
Right.
Where other people, they hear just a twig snap 3 blocks away and they're up and their eyes are alert. They're like a Doberman,
Yeah.
searching.
Yeah.
So much stuff we don't know.
I won't keep it much longer, but just has your opinion or theory on the case, has it changed from the beginning? Has it many times police tell me that investigations are fluid. Has your belief or thoughts on the case, has it changed? Have you come to a different position than you were, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
No, my
No.
2 positions, and I will go back and beat them into people's head. Either it was a burglary gone wrong, or it was never a burglary. Those are it cannot be both. It
Okay.
can only be one or the other. And the longer time goes on, I mean, when we had these fake ransom, I knew they were fake from the beginning. Those are what I call parasitic communications. Um, as you noticed, John, with that, when's the last time we heard anything about a quote alleged ransom note? That was all a scam. That's what I
Yeah.
believe. So my opinion on that hasn't changed, and I think it was a disservice for TMZ to put this stuff out there just to get clicks and to get
Yep.
people talking about it, because it was a complete distraction and waste of
It
resources. But
was.
my
Yeah.
thing is, my opinion has not changed, but I will say, because it's one or the other, but I will say the longer we go, the more I lean towards it was a targeted abduction, simply because of the exfiltration out of there. I did a whole article. I did a whole analysis of what I called egress analysis. This had to be somebody familiar with the area. You've been out there, John. I've been out there. It's like a bowl of spaghetti.
Yep.
You turn it upside down. There's no rhyme or reason to the streets.
Right.
You have to
Yes.
know where you're going. So
Yes. No, I tell people one wrong turn, it's like a maze. All the streets kind of seem the same. There's cactuses everywhere. It's not easy to get in and out, let alone, without the street lights. And it just would, I know, and people say that and hear when we say that there's no lights and it's very, very dark. But as a neighbor said to me, what they used to enjoy about the area was, as they say, you don't have light pollution. It's a beautiful element to it of you don't have the street lights. But as this woman said to me, but now it is seen as, she's wondering, does that attract more potential burglar crime type to this area because people know that there's no lights. I can tell you that the amount of interest in people moving into gated communities has kind of gone through the roof around here since this happened. So, Morgan, number one, thank you for the time. How can people follow your tremendous work?
It's you can find, if you can't find me, you're not trying hard enough. I'm doing this long enough. I'm out there on the internet. So, but you can go to crimereconstructed.substack.com. I'm also the CEO and founder of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases. We've got 18 agencies lined up for our pilot. We're a 501c3 funded by the Department of Justice. So we're just getting ready to do our pilot. There's two pieces, law enforcement and the public, but you can find us at openunsolved.org. We're going to be doing a lot more announcing by that. And then from there, but if you just catch me on Crime Reconstructed, .substack.com, that's where a lot of my work lives. That's where my podcast is, my notes. And then I'm on, as with you, John, I appreciate the chance to talk. I appreciate things like this because we get a chance to actually discuss. When I do stuff for the networks, you're limited to 3 minutes, and half of that time is the anchor making themselves look good. You've done a job at least asking questions and allowing me to respond and not artificially telling me what I ought to be telling everybody, which is your opinion, because I'm not interested in doing that. I'm simply saying, can we give people a different view of the case and a different way of looking at the case, a different framework, and not say it's one or the other, but to say, but if it's going to be one or the other, then what has to be true for that to be the case?
I have two more questions for you. One, are the comments on the screen, are they distracting to you? Should I remove them, or are they okay?
I do this stuff all the time when I do my, so I do a daily Substack. And actually, I saw one of them. I think her name was Renee Luika, Luika. She goes, great interview or best interview. I paid her to say that. Just want everybody to know.
Come on.
But I read the comments about the Bitcoin and things like that. No, I love this stuff. I do that with mine too. I've got the social media feed up when I'm doing my stuff. I love the comments like this because you get
I'll share the Substack then. Morgan, one more question, and it's on a serious note. So many years ago, it goes way back, but I ended up interviewing the father. So the trail of the case is in 1975, there was this boy, Jason Foreman. It was a Sunday night. The mother calls him home for dinner. He doesn't, show up, and they start a search. This was in Peacedale, Wakefield, Rhode Island. I'll cut to the chase. There was an auxiliary police officer just down the street, and they told him wrongly, you just search your house yourself. So 7 years go by. And then in 1982, this teenager who had lived in the house, he tried to sexually assault a young male paperboy, and they go into the house, and the remains of Jason Foreman were up in his bedroom the whole time. But the reason I mention this is, so they were going to let the guy that did this, Michael Woodmansee, they were going to let him out of prison back in 2011. And I led this movement, and we were protesting outside the prison. And I had the bullhorn into Supermax where he was. And then he voluntarily decided to stay. But the point that I mentioned is when I interviewed the father, John Foreman, those 7 years of Jason, they couldn't go on vacation. He developed a drinking problem. They got divorced. Every time, he told me, every time someone came to the door, they thought, is that news? Every time the phone rang, every time something, it just, the part I'd like you to just touch on is, this is sheer torture and agony for the family of the not knowing. Right now, I would imagine Savannah, every time someone texts her, every time she wakes up, it is the torture on the family of not knowing what happened to the loved one.
Yeah, and let me give you if we got a minute here, I'll give you a case. So after 9/11, I was doing work in the intelligence community, working on some stuff in the joint counterintelligence field activity, counterintelligence field assessment. We were working on big systems, big risks, looking at data. I mean, I'm an information type of person. I mean, my battle space is the information space. There's a lot of tier one operators out there. They fall from the sky. I don't do that stuff. But I always believe that the information we needed to solve the cases or to address terrorism, we always had. And so when I was putting together stuff I wrote the strategy. I was part of the team, but I was the lead on writing the strategy for the Department of Justice, how to share information with 18,000 federal, tribal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. And I was looking at all of the different cases. Let me give you one that I think a lot of people know about. It's Polly Klaas. And so Richard Allen Davis kidnapped Polly Klaas. It took 72 days for them to get back to the place of where he was. And one of the things I briefed them on, I actually have a briefing I do on the DC Sniper. I actually went out and briefed the FBI. I showed them, hey, you have all the data you need. And I was right. Their vehicle was in the system. I don't want to get into too many details here, but it's like, but we had all the data we needed to solve it. To your point, the reason I'm talking about Polly Kloss, Richard Allen Davis was stopped on the side of the road, was interviewed by two sheriff's deputies. The next day, he was a registered sex offender. He had a meeting with his parole officer. One of the first question out of every parole officer's mouth, first two questions. Number one, if you had any contact with the law enforcement, and number two, are you doing drugs? Because you're going to take a P test. He said no. There was no way for them to know easily back in those days that somebody had had contact. And what happened was it took them 72 days to come back to that same place they were. Now, Polly was already dead, but she was in the field about 75 yards, I think, away from Richard Allen Davis, where he was stuck on the side of the road initially. So to your point, you never get over it. You do get through it. I've had to deliver the worst news anybody's ever gotten in their life. You knock on their door at 2:00 in the morning, say so-and-so has been killed, or so-and-so has been killed in an accident or victim of a homicide. It's never easy to do, but the worst thing, to your point, whether it's 7 years or 72 days, it's 72 days of the family not knowing, is the information going to be any better by the time you give it to them? No, but it's going to be 72 days more of agony. With 7 years, you never get over it. It does wane a little bit in terms of like what Savannah was feeling on day one is different than what she's feeling on day 46. It doesn't mean it's any easier, but what they feel is different. But in that case, had they simply done what I'd been talking to them about, structured they had the data. It's in a national system, but anytime you did an inquiry, it stores it offline. We could have mined that offline data to see, somebody could have run his name through and said, oh, he was just inquired upon by this sheriff's office last night. So you told me you didn't have contact. That would have given you a clue to go back out there. But the other thing it would have saved, John, is not just 72 days of family anguish and heartache, 72 days of misinformation, 72 days of the public not knowing, 72 days of police resources being spent to find all the things that all it did was bring them right back to where they could have been within 24 hours had we been sharing the right kind of information of the right kind of data at the right time with the right people. And that's the thing is, you can never, there is no price. Here, let me give you a quick stat. If you've got just here, let me ask you this.
No, go ahead.
Other than when we talk about crime, how murders affect people, how missing people affect people, let me ask you guys and your audience out there, see if they know this question. What is the total cost of crime each year? In other words, we look at the cost of homicides, we look at the cost of rapes, sexual assaults, stolen vehicles. We look at what people have to pay to fix their homes from burglaries. We look at courts, corrections, probation, parole, incarceration, police and law enforcement budgets. So, John, how much money do you think the United States spends each year on the total cost of crime?
Oh boy. That's a tough. I'm not good at a guess. I'm gonna give. I know it'll probably be low ball, but I 2 billion, 5 billion, somewhere in there.
So I'm seeing in here like G. Gaffaro says billions. Debbie says 10 billion. Billions. I hate to tell everybody they're wrong. You folks are off by orders of magnitude that you have no idea. If the cost of crime were the GDP of a country, it would be the fourth largest country in the world. The United States pays 5.7 trillion every year for the cost of crime, and the cost of a single homicide to society is $10.9 million. The number of homicides each year, the cost of homicides is greater than the total combined budget of every law enforcement agency in the United States, federal, tribal, state, and local. So everybody's 20% of all of your money is going to a crime tax. That's why we have to resolve these cases quicker, faster, better. That's the mission of the National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases. And this is, look, I didn't invent this stuff. This comes from a study called The Aggregate Cost of Crime. I talked to the professor who did the research. And I actually use this in, I've got meetings with some members of Congress coming up. We're looking for permanent funding for our center. And this is the thing. This is the reset you give people. This is the insight. Nobody realizes how much crime costs the United States each year. And again, if crime were a GDP, it'd be the fourth largest country in the world behind the United States, China, and I believe India. So can you imagine the crime is the fourth largest country in the world, bigger than the UK, Germany, Japan? I mean, name a country. But this is what we pay for this stuff. So the question is, how do we solve it quicker, faster, better? How can we solve a case that's gone on for 46 days now and get it down to 2 days, right? How does that will drop the cost society pays, that we pay, that every taxpayer pays in terms of crime. So we got to do a better job of shrinking the time it takes to find that missing person, solve that 7-year-old case, things like that. So, I mean, there's so many things that go into it.
Folks, again, he is CEO, founder, National Center for Open and Unsolved Cases. I just hope he would agree to come back again sometime. Morgan Wright. Morgan, really, really interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to share your Substack information, and I just hope you'd consider coming back sometime.
Hey, anytime you want to invite me back, schedules permitting, this is the mission of the National Center for an Open and Unsolved Cases. How do we help you and your audience do a better job of understanding, cutting through all the noise and getting down to the
Yep.
signal? And let's make everybody better at understanding what's going on.
Morgan Wright. Morgan, thank you again. We'll talk again.
You bet. All right, John, thank you.
Okay, folks, then there it is. Morgan Wright. Boy, he was terrific right here on the John DePietro show. Now we have another guest that's going to be joining me coming up. I want to for tuning in, and I want to say a quick hello to everybody. I like to let the guest be the focal point. Obviously, I could do the split screen, but I feel, listen, I spend enough time where when I get to look at everyone, I feel mine as well. Just let them focus. I like that he does also like the chat. There's a lot to unpack with that. There's a lot of information. He is, I mean, as I told you, he is so knowledgeable. And what I like is, the more you hear that, the more you get a sense to me. He seems to have it down to two different scenarios. So now I want to just reset. We are live on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM. You can listen online at our website, depetro.com. Right now, we are live on Facebook. We are also live on YouTube. And remember, if you're on YouTube, you can certainly, and I want to thank everyone for all the super stickers. I also like, he didn't mind having the chat and the comments on Facebook. You can send stars. I do want to thank, we have a number of different sponsors. I do things a little bit differently than some others. There was a lot there. One of the things I was almost going to ask him is, would he consider coming in and taking over the case, for crying out loud? But I just find when you listen to someone like that, he just has such a background and such insight that to me, he just kind of takes it to another level. So I want to thank Propane Plus. Again, tremendous source of energy online at propaneplus.com. In Rhode Island, you can always call them at 401 885 4209, or in Massachusetts, 508 252 3359 for Propane Plus, and always online at propaneplus.com. As people are complaining about the price of gas, it certainly doesn't have to be that way for home heating oil. So propane you're in a completely different ball game if you go with propane. And there's just no one better than Propane Plus. So give them a call today. The Johnson family, they are so tremendous and very, very committed and reliable. And remember, always online, 24/7 at propaneplus.com. So as I mentioned, we are live right now on both Facebook and YouTube. And I really want to thank, and also on the radio, but boy, the YouTube crowd. Thank you, Lisa. Really enjoy your interview. Thank you, Lisa Marie Caruso. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I will take the compliment from Morgan, where he said, a lot of times he gets talked over, or the person on television tries to bring the interview around his thought. I just like to listen. I do enough talking. I don't need to then share my own thought belief on it. I have very, very specific questions for those that are tuned in. Yes, this is the familiar scene in front of the home. I want to remind people, the FBI has not left this general area. The FBI is still very, very strong in in the area. The FBI is still going around and talking to different neighbors in the area. And I did post an update um, at least on Facebook and TikTok. I'm going to post it on YouTube when we are done with this part of the day. Although I am starting to lean towards maybe going a little bit longer with this, and especially with our YouTube crowd. Make sure you follow the page on YouTube. On Facebook, you can certainly share that you are watching, but YouTube kind of wins the day. But I think it's interesting. So the FBI is looking into different contractors, and they're very interested. And I don't mean just like a quick go up, hey, who are some of the people? It sure seems to me, from what I've learned, that they want to really dive into who are some of these contractors that have been in the area, who they're employing in the area, and I think with Morgan just talking about, is it possible that some information was given that was overlooked, like with Poly Class? There's Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, who's a new member, part of our YouTube, growing YouTube family. Yep. Um, I think that's a really interesting dynamic of if if is it possible? That's also, as much as some people are saying and questioning, why are they going back and looking at things? And I was speaking with a member of law enforcement last night that was saying many times what you really just need is fresh eyes looking at it. And it's nothing against the individual. And sometimes people, it doesn't mean that they didn't remember or have important information when you were talking to them. It just means that, is it possible that they hadn't thought of something? Or, a lot of times when people, again, this is what I was told, is when they're talking to law enforcement, that people get nervous. And let's face it, suddenly there's a knock at the door, and one or two, usually two people at a time, come in, and they're FBI agents. Okay, that's going to be unnerving. That's not exactly like, hey, can I get you some water? I mean, so as people are trying to get their thoughts together, they may not remember something. Or as a former agent told me, a lot of times people make the decision that they know something, but they don't say it because they don't think it's that important, when it's actually really important. Now, Rhode Island and Massachusetts, don't forget about I've been saying, what you're looking at right now is Nancy has this circular driveway, and it sure seems as though they brought the vehicle right up to the front door, because then the blood splatter ends after the second step. So I see more and more people here in the Catalina foothills. They're putting at least a gate on their driveway. If there's a gate on your driveway, it doesn't mean someone can't walk onto your property, but they're not going to drive onto your property, and they're not going to drive you away from the property. Capital Fence, free estimate, and they're licensed and insured. Highest quality, lasts for years. Protect your family, protect your employees, protect your business. Capital Fence, 401 618 4407. Tell owner Mike Rizzo that I told you that he'll give you a free estimate, because he will. Capital Fence, automated gate. Many times, how you have the automatic garage door opener? Well, people have that for gates for their driveway, for their home. Capital Fence, serving Rhode Island and Massachusetts, 401 618 4407. Again, it's Capital Fence. Well, right now, on this day 46, and I want to make sure, I like to stay up on the latest on this story. A lot of people in the media are noticing that the FBI, it is interesting that they're going back and they're talking to certain neighbors again, and they're going through certain footage that they've had again. And I think it's, um, oh, hold on. I am seeing this. KVOA Tucson. The supervisor, Matt Hentz, has confirmed there's a discussion regarding Chris Nanos is on the agenda for the next scheduled meeting. Boy, this would be interested if they found a way to force him out. I know there is a recall on him, but that would be I don't know enough about if they actually have the power to remove him. I can tell you that it certainly isn't making him gung ho to talk to the media. But if they were actually a Tucson leaders to discuss his resume concerns, supervisors confirm this is News 4 Tucson. Who did the story on this? Jillian Bartz. He's on the agenda for the next scheduled meeting, March 24th, about his resume. Troubling revelations. Now, his resume lists his tenure in El Paso from 76 and 84. States should have ended in 82. They had interviewed him. He also clarified an incorrect date, noting his promotion to captain was listed 2009 as resume. It actually occurred 2007. Um, I don't know if that, maybe I'm just falling subject to a headline where they're hinting that that could end up costing him his job. I think you have to, are they really going to, at this point, try to remove him? And I also wonder if, the Guthrie family, as far as we know, they have not said anything about the sheriff. And what I mean about that is, what if Savannah Guthrie put out a video saying that I would feel more comfortable if the investigation were handed over to the FBI or someone else took over the investigation. I think that would be a really interesting development. Again, we're live right now on Facebook and YouTube. I want to thank Finley. Finley, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for that. So, with the super chats, and again, I did mention Lisa Marie. I want to thank our mod, Debbie, on that. I don't know. I think the dynamic of, I want to say this about the sheriff. He is the person up front. He clearly has made some errors, and there's a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, that have lost confidence in him. However, from what I understand, he has very good investigators. And I mean, unless there is some major piece of evidence that he is keeping from the FBI, or if there was some real major blunder, I think that would be pretty dramatic if they were to then suddenly announce that he's not part of it. But we don't know. I think it is an unknown about his relationship with the Guthrie family. They did have to go through polygraph. From what I understand, it was the FBI that did polygraphs with the family, according to Megan Kelly. I think it's also interesting. Brian Enton of News Nation had an interview with former FBI, and the most interesting thing I took out of it was with a polygraph test. As much as people say, well, polygraph is not admissible in court. Well, the fact of the matter is, and I didn't know, but there's an interview about before you do the polygraph, and then there's an interview after the polygraph, and those are admissible. So remember, with the polygraph test, it's not whether or not the person is lying, it's whether or not they're being deceptive. And the interviews you have, I could see where someone is kind of lets their guard down and they're saying, okay, we're just going to do a quick interview before we administer this. And they kind of set, we're going to have to ask you about this, or we're going to have to ask you about that. And does that make you uncomfortable? And those conversations are admissible, in court. And then conversely, the post a polygraph interview where they say, I noticed that you seemed a little bit nervous when I asked you about something in your phone. So, okay, it's true. How the person answered during the polygraph is not admissible, but whatever they say afterwards, it is admissible. So if you don't have someone on their game, that, you could have someone feeling like, hey, I could say whatever I want. They can't use this in court. But that is true. But if they said something of, yeah, I was very nervous when you asked me about that, that is something that could be used. So Like I that part of it I think is very interesting. My point in mentioning that is it possible how did the Guthrie family feel about that they were then going to be questioned in that way? Thank you. There's Judith Johnson, one of our new members. How did the Guthrie family feel about that? Did they feel, was Savannah like spitting bullets? Did Savannah have to go through the polygraph? Did Savannah have to go through the polygraph almost as bait to make it seem to Annie and Tommaso like, hey, listen, everybody's, Cameron has to go through it, the whole family. That remains an unknown. Folks, again, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, don't forget about Watson Materials. Call them 401 885 0600. Request a quote from Watson Materials. The most complete selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island is Watson Materials. 401 885 0600. 401 885 0600 for Watson Materials. I also want to mention, since we are on AM 1380 and 99.9 FM, if you're on Mendon Road right now, I'm somewhat envious. You could pop in and see the Queen of Health, Marie, at It's My Health, 1099 Mendon Road in Cumberland. Everything to keep you healthy, diagonally across from Davenport Restaurant. Keep you healthy, keep your children healthy. She also has local products. She has local honey. She also has vitamins for children. She has hemp and CBD products for your pets. Pop in and see Marie, the Queen of Health. It's My Health, 1099 Mendon Road in Cumberland. So it is day 46. And I find it really interesting that the FBI continues to seemingly almost want to go over some of the landscape, maybe redo some of the interviews that had been done by the Pima County Sheriff's investigators. I think that's a really interesting development. And they want to make sure about the fact of, they're going through the notes and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know what? Why not sit down and, show me how you got this footage? We know that they've been going back to some of the different homes around here at different times. And there's one home that has the footage of the blue truck that they've been there 10 times and they keep going through that. I think what Morgan Wright said, and also what Jennifer Coffendeffer said earlier, but Morgan's saying he seems to believe it's one of two things. What if this were a robbery? How did it escalate into an abduction? Or if this was just a targeted abduction, what was the purpose of that? What was the purpose of we're going to go in there and remove this 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie and not even try to, I don't mean to say like not even try to get any money out of it, but it's not even like a ransom. Just like the guest we spoke to yesterday who was mentioning that the whole reason why there's certain crimes that people don't try to commit anymore because they're just too high risk, and kidnappings is one of them. When you think about it, when people talk about kidnappings, the most popular one that people still uh, mention is the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, and think how long ago that was. So because people ask me all the time, what do you really? I don't know, and I'm glad Morgan also illustrated, and it's something that it's an unknown. We don't know what the police know, and it's so difficult. Um, a member of law enforcement, used the analogy with me. I don't know how good it is, but said that he mentioned that kind of like an NFL injury report. That is done so not only the other team knows the extent of how healthy the team is, but it's really done so Las Vegas, the bettors can know about it. And so I come back to the words of the sheriff. And you know what else I really like about what I've mentioned about the interview with the sheriff is I made a big deal about it on Friday, um, because that was new. And that was the first time he said, we've pretty much, the motive we believe he did what he did is the same as we thought on day one. Um, that's very telling. And the fact that he wanted that included in the um, in the report, in the segment that NBC did on it, I find that, just as important, that he wanted it known that he and his team came to this home that you're looking at on February 1st. And by the end of the day, just by looking inside the home, they believe they developed a theory on motive. And the reason why that's significant, as I've said, is that's before they did a polygraph on the family. That's before they had the image, of the masked individual, that they were able to get off of the mask, the image of the guy in the mask, porch guy, as Jen Coffindeffer calls him. That was before all of that they were able to develop that theory. And I think that's um, really interesting. Now, again, I'll admit there are some people that don't take, for whatever reason, but they don't take what the sheriff says seriously. I mentioned there was another member of the media that said, "Oh, he's always saying things and misspeaking and so forth." But he was using singular. He was saying, "We think we know why he did what he did, and we developed that. And when I left this crime scene on that Sunday, we had a theory on motive, and it hasn't veered off that." And the only thing about it that where I may differ than someone that just says, "Oh, he's always misspeaking." Well, this was a taped interview that he said that. It was a taped interview with Savannah's network. This was forward to air, by the way, on the Today Show is when it debuted. And it was the reporter out of NBC Los Angeles. So unless he is totally careless and really, really reckless, why would you, unless he just didn't want to make news and say they? So, but I went back, I've watched it a bunch of times, and the sheriff says we think we know why he did what he did. And he also, and she added in, and by the way, the sheriff says it's the same motive that they arrived at on day one. Um, but would it have been a bigger deal if he had said, we think we know why they did what they did, and suddenly made it plural? So, folks, there's different people on platforms that I encourage people to be on. And I follow this case, as you can tell, as we remain right now, at least for the morning. I think the afternoon will have a little more activity, but we remain the only one media on scene. I always find there's a benefit. There's a benefit being on the ground. But there's someone who caught my eye on the platform X. And not only is it because of the information that's put out, the accurate information put out, attention to detail that is put out, but then he also got a shout out on the Megyn Kelly podcast. And this is my first time talking to him, but it is, you know it on X and I think on YouTube, and it's Nerdy Addict. Nerdy, first of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with me on this uh, 46th day of the Nancy Guthrie investigation.
John, how are you doing?
I'm very well. There's so much we could get into. Let me just start with how did it feel about getting the shout out of Megyn Kelly? Megyn Kelly recognizing you and giving you, she quoted you basically on her podcast.
It's interesting. I don't let it get to my ego. It's certainly nice to get a shout out, but um,
Yeah.
doesn't change anything really. All right. I mean, it
Okay.
got a couple more followers on X on YouTube, and grateful
Mm.
for it, but the work still continues. So I as a recovering addict, I don't try to check my ego. My ego is not my amigo, John. Ego is not my amigo.
Let's instead of I like that. Instead of going back through the whole case, since you and I follow this literally hour by hour, I'm just curious, what do you make of some of the recent developments, starting with, and it's your take and your interpretation, but the sheriff interview on Friday that aired on the Today Show, and then Friday afternoon, I believe it's from the FBI putting out information about the images, more images recovered. Let's just start with that. I'm just curious your thoughts on the sheriff's. It's the most recent interview that he's done.
This is the one where he says he knows the reason, and this was
Yes.
targeted after
Yes.
he initially told the public that there was no threat. I find it interesting. I feel like talking to this sheriff with these one-on-one interviews is like playing the telephone game. I would prefer a press conference where he says it to the public and sticks
Yep.
to what he says, but he's constantly sort of gone back and forth with his statement. So I don't know. It certainly seems targeted, and I've said that from the beginning, right? You look at these, how you're on the ground, right? When you look at these homes, there's nothing that stands out. Her home is not flashier than the other homes. Her car is not flashier than the cars in the area. And so to hit this specific house and have it be Savannah Guthrie's mother is like getting struck by lightning. And so I feel like it's targeted regardless of his statement. So
What about new reports, FBI curious about looking into possible construction crews that have been in the area, and not just seemingly a passing glance. From what I was told, a woman that I talked to here, her friend's having the whole home renovated. So we're not talking about like a minor thing. They had to move out. The crews are there doing it like studs to ceiling. And from what she learned, the man, whoever's the architect or the person doing the construction, they wanted like everything on every worker they've had the past 6 months.
I mean, it's no different from what we heard originally, right? They were questioning the landscapers, the pool guys at Nancy's house,
Yep.
anyone who doesn't belong there permanently, meaning people who don't live there in that neighborhood. They're doing their due diligence, I think. Um, Whether or not it leads to any arrest or even evidence that these people did anything, I don't know. I'd certainly, and I messaged you yesterday. I'd like to know the address so we can look at property and mortgage records and stuff like
Yep.
that. Um, and that would give us maybe some more insight. But yeah, I think I'm not FBI and I'm not law enforcement, but I would. And it seems like they've already done this, right? When they detained Carlos, he didn't belong in the neighborhood just for a short amount of time. It seemed like he may have made
Right.
a delivery there. And so they detained him and questioned
Yeah.
him. And I think they're going to do that for anyone that doesn't belong in that neighborhood permanently.
Where are you, nerdy addict, right now? Just on the case, your general sense of, was it different from where you were some time ago? Um, has it is it altered in any way, or how are you viewing this on this day 46?
I think the benchmark that I've used is the Idaho 4 case, right? It took 47 days from the time of the murder to
Yep.
identifying Brian Koberger as a potential suspect. And so that's really the benchmark here. And I look at other, I don't know, factors, similarities in that case. And I think the three that strike me between Idaho 4 and this case is evil, chaos, and no known motive, right? Even to this day, I don't think we
Yeah.
know a motive that Brian Koberger killed those
Oh.
4 students. And so you have the other aspects, obviously, evil and chaos. It's caused immense chaos for this family.
Yeah.
Obviously, evil, taking an 84-year-old from her home while she's sleeping. And so those three similarities, I keep going back to this motive, and I don't have one. It would seem like the ransom letters that were sent to TMZ and KOLD would prove a motive there, right? You have a financial motive, but that didn't pan out. More interestingly to me is that there's still no arrest there, which
Right.
tells me that law enforcement hasn't pieced together all the digital components of when these people, either a person or people, submitted these web tips. Essentially, we believe that they didn't send emails because TMZ said, look, there's no way to respond to these people. That implies that they went to these websites, they submitted a tip, and those websites have a lot of underlying technology. It's not just one system that you go to try to track this person. And just because you use a VPN doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to remain anonymous, right? A lot of these websites, especially news organizations, they're using underlying analytic platforms, and those don't just trace IP, those trace behavior, right? What am I doing in my browser aside from when I'm visiting this website? That's how they target ads and other things. And so I think it's going to take some time to piece that together, or the other option is that this person sent these ransom letters from a country that we can't extradite from, right? Russia, Iran, one of those countries where we just can't nab the person that sent these.
Mm. You're right. There's been no arrest, and whoever that was that sent those emails, if anything, they've kind of proven that there is a way that people may not be aware of, that you can obviously send email, and even the FBI can't fully trace, or as you say, if it goes through one of those countries, they can't get to the root of it. But that also comes back to Nerdy Addict. And how would you like me to address you, by the way? Just as that, Nerdy Addict?
You could just call me Nerdy, John.
Nerdy, okay. Folks, and again, you can follow him on both X and on YouTube. And which kind of comes back to, if I mean, it's so strange of, if this was, for whatever reason, like vengeance, someone for whatever reason has it out for her or the Guthrie family. Okay, so you go in and take the person's life, but the removing her from the home just seems to, it puzzles even police. And what I don't understand, and again, I learned this from just interviewing different law enforcement and former FBI, is just the amount of risk that goes through the roof of, if you're caught, like whoever did this, the risk of you're pulled over, you're in an accident, you get a flat tire, someone got the plate, so then they do pull you over. And then you have Nancy Guthrie in the vehicle. That is such dirty. That's such a high risk. So is it possible that this was an abduction, but not for money, that someone was like, we're going to go and we're going to remove her? And obviously it doesn't seem like it would have a good outcome here.
Well, what you just described is a Brian Koberger, right? No known motive, just
Right. Good point.
just going in and doing something like this. And I'm assuming at least that Nancy is no longer with us. I don't
Right.
know what your thoughts are, but to go in and do this without any motive, without any fear of what you've just described, is a psychopath. And I can relate that type of situation to Brian Koberger. I think you asked about thumbnails and these recent images that the FBI was able to retrieve. I think that's going to be the biggest break in this case, is piecing together these digital components. I said this yesterday on X. The only other way I can think, Brian Koberger left a sheath behind. They had a white Elantra that they were tracking. We don't have any of those things, and the vehicle is certainly interesting. It's made me think that perhaps this was someone local, someone that lives in the neighborhood, right? If we don't have a vehicle of interest within this 2-mile radius, did they even use a vehicle? That's the first thought. But back to the digital evidence, I think that there's two things going on here. I think people were surprised that Google even had video from this incident, because Nancy didn't have a subscription. Being in the tech world, we know that data is mined, right? Google's not a search company. They're a data mining and advertising company, and they're training their AI models. So the more data they have, even though consumers don't know that they're uploading this data and they're saving it and reviewing it for patterns, I think we're going to see more of that. I think maybe the delay is that they don't want to alarm people, right? This came right after the Super Bowl ad, where people recognized that they were able to look for dogs in neighborhoods.
Right.
Their capabilities are much, much greater than what I think people realize. And I think eventually these pieces will come together for the digital evidence. I don't think people quite understand how these things work. When you upload Nest footage to Google, it's not going to a computer. It's going to a data center that's replicated to different storage nodes. And so when a person doesn't have a subscription, it's not indexed. It's basically just there for Google to retain it and do what they want, but it's not indexed. So you can't pull up your phone and look at it. And they have to piece these data fragments, if you will, together. I think the thumbnails is interesting. It means that they're getting somewhere. I think eventually engineers at Google working with law enforcement will be able to get more. I do.
What do you make of the images from the Nest camera of, two law enforcement sources told Fox, and I think told ABC at least, but at least Fox, I'll stay with them, that they believe it was from different dates. They have been coming back now and asking neighbors now, this February 24th would have been the week before. Initially, we were January 11th. And then, obviously the other one is that night or the early morning hours of February 1st. The sheriff, their official statement that I believe is that there's no timestamp, so you can't prove that the images, one with the backpack, one without the backpack, that they are in fact, you can't prove that they're different nights or different days. Whereas whoever's communicating with law enforcement, and I think people need to understand that many of the networks, they're not going to go with just Joe Schmo. This is going to be someone that they feel very comfortable, knows what they're talking about. But what thoughts do you have, of any, on the two different images?
No. I mean, I picked up what everyone has picked up, right? He's not wearing his gun on his hip and there's no backpack. I don't know that it's separate nights. I've tried evaluating the lighting in the background and, running it through AI systems. I guess I keep coming back to the basics, right? If this individual was on her camera on January 11th or January 24th, wouldn't it make sense that she got no subscription required to get notifications on your camera that there's motion at your front door? She
Right.
would have seen this image and this notification come through. And my first question is, wouldn't she have contacted law enforcement? You see this strange individual sitting there on your camera well before you're abducted, a week before. Now, you could go with the argument that, well, she's older and she wasn't checking notifications, but at some point she checked her phone, right? She was going to church. She was not going to church, but she was going to a friend's house to watch church on
The
Zoom.
service.
So
Yeah.
there's communication there on her phone, and you're not going to just ignore a notification saying, hey, motion's been detected at your door at whatever time of the night it was weeks before. So I don't know. And quite frankly, we've had a lot of information on this case that just hasn't been factual, right? Right off the get-go, Ashley Banfield saying, well, the family's, the prime suspect number one. And that turned out not to be true. And there's other things that have turned out not to be true from the media and from people on the ground. And so I just go back to this logical sort of framework of, well, if he was seen on the camera, she would have got a notification and she would have reported it, right? And that didn't happen. And so I don't know that it happened on separate nights, or we're just seeing this individual without a gun and a backpack in between that 41 minutes that he was inside the house, or we believe he was inside the house.
Nerdy, when you look at that individual on the Nest cam and the video approaching head down, then going up to the camera, then the flowers, I'm just curious, you see a lot of video. I'm just curious your impression of that individual. Like, what's your takeaway?
Well, they're not carrying their weapon correctly, and then back to my other point. If this person was at the house on a different day without the backpack and the gun, they're certainly standing at an angle where they would have seen the camera. Whatever happened on this night when Nancy was abducted, they are surprised by that camera, right? That's what we believe. They went back and grabbed these brushes or flowers or whatever they are and
Right.
put them on the camera. If you were casing the house on January 11th or January 24th and were standing where that image is, he would have known the camera was there and would have came prepared. In terms of everything else, the one thing that I pick up on is that if this was the first time doing it, I think that we'd see different mannerisms, and the way this person acted was very calm. That's been striking since day one.
Yep.
Certainly seems surprised by that camera, but not startled enough to change mannerisms, stays pretty calm. And you have to be you either have to be a psychopath to have that much confidence that you're going to be undetected for 41 minutes inside that home while doing something nefarious to this 84-year-old woman. So,
what do you make of also? And again, these are just your general impressions. But actually, let me step back for a moment. What general impressions about the case or where we are right now that strike you that you just want to mention? Like something that stands out to you as of just say in the past couple of days that you find interesting.
I mean, this entire case is interesting, John. I agree.
Yes.
It's been a spectacle of sorts at times. We've had people singing to the house. We've had DUI arrests in front of the house. We've had these
Yes.
individuals come barely dressed and doing spirit boxes in front of the house. You've had psychics show up. That's all sort of a spectacle to me. I think the most glaring thing in this case is that besides height and build, right? We have nothing from law enforcement for what the public should be looking for. And in the same breath, you have a sheriff who's saying, look, this person could strike again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like we assume that in the Brian Koberger case, right? If Brian got away with it, the type of individual that it takes to carry out this crime is sick in the head, first of all. And typically, and you talk to ex-FBI agents and whatnot, it's going to embolden them. They're going to do it again or try to strike again. I don't know. I think that I keep going back to that ransom letter. Like, that's the only one motive that I can see in this case. I've gone back to Today Show footage now, like prior to the January 11th date and the January 24th dates and January 31st. I've gone back and rewatched shows and like I'm looking, like the temperature in the country was certainly hot, right? You had Minneapolis occurring, and I'm looking for things that Savannah said that would have pissed somebody off, and I just don't see it. And I thought this may sound crazy, but prior to January, she was off.
Yes, she had the surgery.
Vocal surgery. The only thing I can think of is, like, if I was a stalker that was infatuated with this woman, perhaps it pissed them off that they weren't able to see her on the news every day. I don't know, right? I'm not in the mindset of this sick individual, but somebody that I'm infatuated with all of a sudden disappears. I'm not able to see them. Then they come back and perhaps in their mind this was just revenge for that. I don't know. I have no better sense of the motive here than anyone else. And it seems like, including the sheriff himself, like just, nobody's given a clear motive of why this happened, which is scary, right? If this is just a sick individual targeting high profile people and killing them, that is scary.
Yeah. I mean, and especially as we talk about it, and I've mentioned, Luigi Mangione, he had never met Brian Thompson. He never worked at United Healthcare, and yet he traveled to New York for the very purpose of taking him out. Now, he may have had his own mindset of why he was doing that. It had to do with the high cost of healthcare and so forth. But Brian Thompson had never met him, had never wronged him. There hadn't been a fight. And also with Charlie Kirk, he had never met Tyler Robinson. Tyler Robinson had never worked for him. Their paths had never crossed. Tyler Robinson traveled there to take him out. You even have that with Butler, with the crook who he was just like a stock boy and sees in the paper, oh, look, the candidate Trump is coming here and sets out a mission that he's going to take him out. I think it does become more frightening, Nerdy, if it's not a money gain. It's just like Kohlberger. I know there's no motive, but to me it was, he wanted to see, could he actually carry this out and get away with it? We know he didn't, but you're right. There was no real motive here. And I think that's what's throwing them. Yet why would, I want to come back to the sheriff say, we believe we know the motive. We believe, him and his team, it's pretty much the same motive we had from day one. I come back to, what did they see inside that house where when they left here, they were all kind of nodding like, yep, that's what it was? Because you've seen the drones. There's no broken window. Someone was saying maybe the guy with the mask forced his way through the front door. Well, the front door is not damaged. It never has been damaged. There doesn't seem to be any damage to the home. It is possible. Many of the people around here have told me they have left, they leave their doors open, or they even leave their doors ajar to get some of the night cool air that comes in. But that's where I'm stuck on. Like, I'm taking the sheriff at his word, Nerdy, but what did they see inside where they walked away and said, yep, that's what we believe it is? And now, 40 days later, we were on the right path.
Don't know. I don't know. I've always said from the beginning, because of the no forced entry, we saw that floodlight on the rear of her home destroyed.
Yes.
I've always came up with that same assumption, is that this person didn't force entry. And I said it to people like myself. I lived in Colchester, Connecticut for a long time and had kids. We didn't lock the doors. You get comfortable enough in a neighborhood where there's no crime. And you often forget to lock doors. That back, first of all, she didn't have good mobility, right? She had her wits about her. Her brain was there.
Yep.
which makes me believe she would have checked the notification if this individual was there previous to that night. But her mobility is limited, and so perhaps walking to that rear sliding door, right? You have the gates and the brick around you. It feels like it's safe. Like I can picture myself there saying, "Well, I don't need to lock
Sure.
that black back sliding door tonight." And perhaps they got in that way. And then the other thought is on this bite light that this person used.
Mm.
There's a lot of saliva on a bite light, and at some point in that 40 minutes that person touched something within the house, whether it was, did he drop it on the floor, and have police done a good enough job on swabbing that house for DNA? I think we're going to be looking at the same components that we saw in the Koberger case, right? IgG data for DNA, if they have DNA from inside that house, or digital aspects of this case to break, including reconstructing thumbnails and videos from these cameras.
Nerdy Addict, folks, look for him on X, look for him on YouTube. I'll tell you, you and I have never spoken before. You have really, really good insight, and you are very interesting to listen to. So, any sites or anything that you want to plug that you find of interest or you stumble across that you think, oh, one thing, what do you make of, like, I've noticed Megyn Kelly and Nancy Grace, they're not going less on the coverage. They're going, while the rest of the national media are saying, everything's on the streets and whether or not the oil tanks are going to get through. But those two individuals, they're going like full blast on the story. I'm just curious if, and obviously like Brian Enton, but he has to follow what News Nation kind of guides him toward. But just any other sources of information that you have found has good info.
No, I think it comes down to people like, first of all, Nancy Grace blocks me. We've had our issues with Nancy Grace.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no,
All right.
you don't have to say sorry. I chuckle at it. But I will say, like, there's a difference between people that do this, right? You have to make some money doing this, right? You can't,
Okay.
you traveling. Same with the media. But I think there's people that truly care. Like,
Yes.
even Eva and I have like tried to put this case to the side, right? It seems like it's going cold, but we still wake up and go to bed every single night talking about this case. And I think there's something that differentiates certain people. And so when you talk about Megyn Kelly and Nancy Grace, I think they're going to bed the same way. Like, what the fuck happened? Sorry to use.
No, that's all right.
On your channel, but like, what the hell happened here? Because it's a real whodunit, and you have a lot of speculation, you have a lot of miscommunication from law enforcement on this, and I think people that truly care and want to bring Nancy home are still going to live and breathe this every single day.
Yep. Oh, I agree, folks. Nerdy Addict, Nerdy. Thank you very much. Great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll do this again.
I appreciate the time, John. How hot is it there?
The temperature's climbing. It's gonna be 95 in about 2 hours. So I noticed, I do a lot of walking in the area. I noticed that everyone seems to do it either in the early morning or the afternoon. The next couple of days, it is going to be a challenge because it's going to be over 100 degrees. The sun kind of becomes the enemy. Shade is very coveted. So I've never operated in heat this hot, but it's going to be, like I saw, record-setting heat for March. And what I notice when I walk around is it's generally pretty quiet around here. I mean, I don't see people sitting out on a porch. I live in the Northeast. I was telling a friend of mine, when I walk around in the Northeast, I see some kids shooting baskets in their yard, or kids with street hockey, or I see people watering the grass, taking care of the garden. I mean, there's none of that. There's no grass. There's no garden. There's just a lot of elderly people, and this is during the day they're not out. So at night, you could easily get around here, and you're not passing anybody. Certainly not on foot. My God, after dark, forget about it. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes with the heat. So, but Nerdy, great to talk to you. Keep up the great work. Everyone follow him, or you should. I encourage you on X and also on YouTube. Nerdy, thank you, and we'll talk to you again.
Welcome, John. Stay cool and be safe.
All right, folks, there it is. Nerdy Addict. Again, I think he is so in tune. He's very, very talented. He's also modest. He's got a great way about him. Now, this is, again, day 46. I have been trying to stay up. I see we have a very good crowd on X, and that's positive. We have a very good crowd on YouTube. And I know Facebook, there's a lot of interest in the story on the page. Maybe it's not as much on the live, but this is what I am into. And we've had three very good guests on this day 46. There have been a number of people coming out. I don't always try to show the people coming out just because a lot of them seem to want to enjoy a little bit of privacy. They're not saying, yeah, I want to go out and leave flowers and be on a live stream. So I haven't been showing everyone that's been coming out. So listen, we're going to see what the afternoon brings. It's definitely going to be much warmer than normal. And in the Northeast, if you get 3 days in a row over 90 degrees, it's considered a heat wave. And over the next few days, we're going to have more than 3 days in a row with temperatures over 100. So I think that qualifies as maybe a super heat wave. So if you're watching on YouTube, again, I want to thank everyone for all their super stickers. I'll check some. I could actually. Um, I'm glad that Morgan said he doesn't mind the comments in the chat. I will be posting how you can find him on Substack. If you're on X or YouTube, I strongly encourage you to follow Nerdy Addict. He's very modest, but he is a brilliant individual. Let me just make sure. I want to make sure I'm not missing any messages. Let's see. Watching Kentucky, think he bought a Halloween store. I don't know about that. Um, Again, the FBI, they seem convinced that the individual is a male. I know early on some people were saying that they thought it was actually a female in the mask. So let me just also check one more thing. And then, nope, we do want to show that. Okay. Let me, what was this comment? I agree. Open minded on transportation. I don't know what to make of that. I know that there has been talk about, see, this part though, Trump has something to do with this. I don't, I think he's got bigger fish to fry. I know some people have said that, but we've kind of heard that from the beginning. I don't even like to really repeat that because it just seems so ridiculous to me of that somehow the president is involved in this. Um, I don't think they're running down that lead, to put it mildly. I don't think so. So I think there's different things that they're looking at. I know there are, but I don't think the idea that somehow that the president, we've been hearing about the whole distraction thing since this happened. This is a distraction. It's a distraction from the Epstein list and blah blah blah. And despite that, they didn't seem to be successful because there was quite a bit of coverage and the Epstein list came out. So I'm not sure exactly, whoever thinks that this was being done as some kind of a distraction, I think that we could say that they failed. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I do have some neighbors that I'm going to follow up on. I'm going to wait and see what the heat is like today. I normally am live on TikTok in the afternoon. Let me check the temperature. It is going to, okay, right now it's already 86. Okay. And it's going to be 95 degrees at 2 o'clock, and it's going to be 95 into the later afternoon. So there are some people that I need to follow up with. And I also want to see, again, I keep trying to get an interview with the sheriff, but he's not talking to anyone. I agree with Nerdy that, yeah, it would be great. But he's also, to me, the sheriff's dealing with a little bit of incoming right now, which is, he's got a recall against him. And he has, now they're talking about that they really want to put it out there of whether or not he should be removed from the investigation. and I don't know. I am very anxious to see. I find it hard to believe that would be really, really difficult if they suddenly removed him, regardless of our thoughts about it, regardless of our thoughts. So, listen, this has been, I think, a very good morning. Thank you, everybody tuning in. Thank you for all the super stickers and all of the super chats on YouTube. Thank you for all the stars. If you're on X, remember, follow me on either Facebook or YouTube or both. And I'm going to see what the afternoon brings. I think I will be live on TikTok later. I know some people say, well, I'm not on TikTok. Well, it's free. It's a free app, but I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see how the afternoon breaks out. But for now, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, you can also go to the website, depetro.com. Thank you to our mods. Thank you to our different guests that we've had. And we're going to have a lot more. Again, day 46. We're not going anywhere. You know what? Let me play it right now, actually. I want to play the video that my friend Sal did. Now that I'm going to sign off, I'm just going to change. There we go. Okay. Okay. I think we could. I think we're good with sound. I think we should be, meaning I'm not using AirPods, just otherwise you won't be able to hear. Let me just tap in. I can't really see the chat there. Oh, I see. If I shut off the chat on the screen, then I can see it. I normally don't have it on the screen, but I'll keep it on the screen. Morgan liked it. That was a really good interview. Thank you to Captain Kevman, Graybeard. He really liked the interview with Morgan. I told you the guy is just, but Jen is also fantastic as well. All right, let me, I think the audio is fine. I think it's fine. Let me just, I told you the guy is just, but Jen is also, it is fine. Okay. All right, everybody, here is my friend Sal, who's very talented. Follow him on X, Henry B. Chafee. And he came up with this video for people asking me if I'm leaving or when am I leaving. And I know people say you shouldn't get angry, but I just find it slightly annoying. I wouldn't say angry, but okay. This is a take on Tucson Airport and kind of a take on the Wolf of Wall Street. And then you should be able to recognize, put in the comments who you recognize from this. We debuted it yesterday on TikTok. So I don't know who that is racing around. I don't know who that is. Hold on. And here we go. So I like that. I'll play it. Hold on, folks. There's some vehicle that is circling. It's always a little odd when a vehicle starts to come by. I'm assuming they don't understand the nature of when they're suddenly just coming, and then they kind of speed up a little bit. I don't understand why someone would do that. Who knows? There's all kinds of nutcases. Let me show that again, though. Because then there's even a second part to it as well that I think is great. You should see Sheriff Nanos in there. You see Brian Enton. And then the last thing that you should see is you see Tommaso. And then you also, I think that's okay. And then you see Pinky, who did the signs. Here we go. Oh, hold on. Damn it. Why does it do that? Hold on. Here we go. You know what? I'm not leaving.
leaving. I'm not fucking leaving.
I love that. Hold on. Then there's a part 2 to it. I think this is the part 2. No, that's the first one again. Hold on. Here's part 2. Goes a little bit longer. No, that's not. That's not it. What's wrong with me? Should be right here. These people are. When are you leaving? Like enough already. When am I leaving? What the fuck do you care? Enough asking me that. I'll play from the beginning.
You know what?
I know. Someone sent me a message yesterday. Let me just say a quick hello. Some woman sent me a message saying she was mortified in seeing that. And, like, how dare you? And listen, when I saw that, my friend Sal put it together. I was literally, I know people use the expression laugh out loud, but I was howling with that. I was. If you don't appreciate that, I can't help you. If you don't appreciate that, you're at the wrong stream. If you can't appreciate the originality of people, me getting fed up, because Sal could hear me saying, I'm tired of these people asking, when are you leaving? Are you leaving? When are you flying home? Are you leaving? Finally, like, no. And I was even talking to him, like, I'm not leaving. Why did they keep? So then he just gets to work, and you see Sheriff Danos, you see the Tommaso thing. I listen. He's a part of this, whether they like it or not. I'm not saying he's involved, but he's in there. He makes a cameo. Brian Enton of News Nation, just because then he was on my TikTok, and then Pinky in there as well. So no, listen, this is D46. What is this? If anything, the rest of the media should come back here, in my opinion. When am I leaving? What? Like I say, I haven't had a curfew since high school, and even then it was somewhat questionable. Some of my friends will tell you they don't remember that there ever was a curfew in high school. So when are you leaving? Who the frig is asking? All right, folks, I hope you have enjoyed. We are going to start doing this. I think we've kind of hit on a good time here. Early in the morning, it doesn't get too hot. We'll see how the afternoon goes. And then we'll kind of go from there. Thank you to all of our guests. Again, follow me on Facebook, follow me on YouTube, follow me on X, follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I want to thank everybody, all of our mods and so forth. And remember, day 46, I'm also going to check out if the FBI is grilling some of these construction workers. But we remain on the ground. I'm not leaving. You know what? I'm not leaving. All right, right here. It's John DePietro. Everybody enjoy this Wednesday. I think I'm going to be back later on TikTok.